Hello, welcome to another Random Code stream. My name is Jason Bach. I'm going to be working on another suppressor, or maybe two, I don't know, in rocks. So I'll explain a little bit about what suppressors are, just to level set, and then I have to refresh my memory on how you actually make one of these work. I've done it before in rocks, but they're not that common, at least they've not been common in my life. So I need to get my head around them and then create one, maybe two. So before I continue, let me get my background music going on here. Okay, so I was going to do some stuff with that tachyon interception library. I will get back to that, but this actually came up at work this week. It's not like an issue. It's not like a problem of rocks per se, but it can show up. And so that's what makes it a little problematic, and you can write a suppressor. So what is a suppressor? A suppressor, we already have one. So if we have code in rocks like this, where we're passing in to the return value a value task, what the compiler will do, especially if you have treat warnings as errors, or at least it'll show this up as an analyzer issue. Use value tasks correctly. Okay, so this will come up, and it's about that a value task is instance returned from a member invocation is used in a way that could lead to exceptions, corruption, or poor performance. Attempts to consumer value task multiple times, because if you use a value task, you should only use it once. With runtime async, it's possible that value task might become obsolete, but that's a future thing, and that's definitely not right now. So, no, I do not want to give feedback to you right now, Microsoft, on your page. Please go away. You can't see it. It's right underneath my picture, but my camera. But I got that little useless pop-up coming up. No, to be fair, packages that I write in .NET, it's really hard to, like, unless somebody tells you, hey, I like it, or hey, I'm having an issue, you just don't know who's using it, who likes it, who doesn't. If I go, to NuGet, so we're up to 12,000. I think that's the most. I had one version that got 10,000 once, and that was over 3 months. And I don't know why, because the next one, like the numbers for the first one went down. I know these came up because I was using it when I was at Magenic for a team project, and so we would be using that there. But it's gone up. I mean, for me, it's gone up a little bit. So, and that was just 2 months ago. So, yeah, it's a numbers game, I guess. But you don't necessarily know how things are being, and I don't like taking telemetry without, having any kind of permission. So anyway, this rule pops up, and it will pop up because in rocks, because you might do something to say, hey, if there is something that returns a value task and the user decides to do this, you'll get that warning popping up. And so what we want to do is say, well, we want this to be suppressed. Okay. So you can use a suppressor and use value task correctly analyzer. Oh, that's the other fun thing about this. You have to find the analyzer that's creating it. And we don't own the analyzer. So it might be interesting to try to find what analyzer actually is the one that generates it, because that's the one you want to say you're suppressing in a certain case. So if you look at the suppressor itself, it derives from diagnostic suppressor, says, here's a description of the and this again is for my own refresher, because I don't remember exactly how to do this. Supported suppressions, we could do more than one, but we'll keep it separated. And then reporting the suppression. So you have to look at all the reported diagnostics, look at the IDs, and look at the location. Make sure it's in source. Look at the source tree. Get the root. Find the node. If it's now, here's what we care about it. If it's an argument syntax, because if we look at the test, it's an argument here. So that's our first qualifier. Okay. Now we want to find the parent, because if it's an argument syntax, it should be part of an invocation. If we find that, then we want to go to the semantic model and say, well, if that invocation method is called return value and that method is on something rocks adornments with 4 generics, because that's what it would be, then we look at the type of what's the parameter is. And we know in our case it would be only one parameter. And we see how it's constructed from. If it's constructed from a value task or a generic value task, then we suppress it. So you want to be narrow to say what's the context of where this diagnostic is coming from. And you can't suppress compiler errors with this. So you can't be cute that way. That doesn't work. It can only work if it's a analyzer, if it's a diagnostic that comes from an analyzer, not a compiler error. So the reason I want to do this is because this has been something we saw at work when we were using this, which is this case, which I'll get to. This one is one we're definitely seeing. So we're getting this CA 2025. Okay. Let me look that one up. So do not pass idisposable instances into unawaited tasks. So what we're seeing here is we have a response, okay? And that response, where's that response coming from? Yes. So we have the response message because we want to hook, in this example, that we have a send async. So we're trying to do HTTP context, right? Message handler. Yeah, I should have. I didn't follow my own thing. I should have put a little bit better test in here. But we're setting up a callback or whatever. The point is, in the callback or in the return value, we're doing a task from result. And so if we look at the rule, it's saying an idisposable instance is passed into an unawaited task and potentially disposed before the task is finished using the instance. Unawaited tasks that use idisposable instances might use those instances long after they've been disposed. Ensure tasks using those instances are completed before the instances are disposed. Suppress these warnings if you know tasks finish using idisposable instances before they're disposed. Okay. So in our case here, with what happens, we know that somewhere down the line, we have and I can probably come up with a simpler example than this, but we know that we're calling send async on this message handler. And we know that the response that we're returning from it, or we should say that the task that we're returning from this one, will be finished before the using kicks in and calls dispose on it. Okay, because the caller is not responsible for it in this case. We are going to do that and handle the using on the response. Okay. It's always about the ownership of a disposable, who actually does that. So what I would like, and what we're seeing in our code is we're seeing an examples where we have this showing up a lot. We got to suppress it all over the place. And I don't like, unless I know it's something systemic in a code base, I don't like suppressing an analyzer across a whole project or across an entire solution, unless I know that it's something we definitely want to ignore because it's just pure noise in whatever case we're in. These, I don't necessarily want to do that, and I don't want it to be up to the user to have to determine that they need to do that. So what I want to do is say, well, if we're passing in an iDisposable instance into an unawaited task, well, we're probably passing it into a from result, or like we saw with the value task one, from result. Okay. So it's interesting that in this case, it's a different thing. Like if we looked at use value tasks correctly, yeah, and this is important to understand, like what the rule is. Yeah, so this is just about value tasks. It's not about disposable. So we're just saying, in this case, we know in all likelihood that the user is only going to await whatever thing is being mocked just once, and so we don't need to worry about the fact that they may or may not do it. So that's why we want to suppress it here. And this weird little syntax is what kicks in to tell the suppressor tool, the tester, that with location 0, well, here's a location 0, and we want it to be suppressed. Okay, because maybe there's cases where we don't want it to be suppressed. And we only want it to be suppressed if it's a return value call on an adornments. In this case, we only want to suppress it if, and this is where it gets a little tricky, if it's within the context of a callback or a return value. If you're making a task from result with just any arbitrary iDisposable, we don't necessarily know where, when, how, or why you're doing that. Okay. If we come back here, hey, Electron. Following code snippets or violations. So we have a disposable thing. Instance is passed into an unawaited task and potentially disposed before the task is finished, choosing the instance. I have physics exam. Well, good luck. Yeah, I remember you. I'm always for learning new things, but I have to admit I do not miss the days of taking tests. I used to actually, when I was younger, I would take pride in trying to do a good job on my tests and get a good grade. And in college, it was actually almost required because I needed to keep a certain GPA to keep my scholarship, and that was incentive to do that. But I don't miss having to study for that type of stuff. The worst, the only thing I run into these days is we have to take corporate training for things every so often, and that is not anywhere near what it was like in college. So, but anyway, so here we have a disposable. We pass that in. Here's a task. We dispose it, and this is a violation if arguments are disposed before the task is awaited. Because the task came back from something that I gotta make sure I get this in my head. I'm scared, sir. What should I do? Take the test? I don't know. What else are you gonna do? You have two choices. You either take it or you don't. Not trying to be sympathetic, or not be sympathetic, I should say. But It is what it is. I had to do that a lot when I was in high school and college. Sometimes I didn't like it because I didn't like the material, or I didn't like the class, but it is what it is. It's a final exam I don't want to fail. I hope that you've studied at this point then. No, not trying to be flippant or dismissive, but it's like, and to be fair, I mean, what's interesting is I've gotten older, especially how technology has changed and how the consumption and usage of data and information has changed over the years. I've always felt it quite silly to say you have to time box your understanding of a concept into a test and that will take you an hour or whatever the time is. I find that silly. And people can say, well, in the real world, you're under pressure all the time to get stuff done and get it done fast. And you don't have the luxury of just sitting there and thinking about things. And I'm like, no, that's not true. I mean, not always. But, there was one class I took when I was in graduate school, and it was the final. I liked the way the teacher did it. He said, okay, the way it works is that your final is given to you in a sealed envelope. Okay. And then you basically have like the whole week of finals week until like Thursday at some time or whatever it was, to finish it. But this is on your honor. He said you could take it wherever you want. You can have whatever materials you want around yourself. And that's the thing too, is the whole memorization thing I think is ridiculous. I don't have everything memorized. I don't have like all these code analysis rules memorized in my head. Nobody does that, but it's understanding how do I get to the information quickly. And so he said you could have your textbook out. You could have any notes that you want to have available, have it all ready. He goes, you can take as much time as you want, but you have to have the test turned in and he told us this weeks in advance, but he said, you get the test, you can pick it up or something on Monday, and then you have till Thursday. He said the other stipulation, he goes, and this is on your honor, is when you open the test, you give yourself 2 hours. And he said, I can't watch you do it. I can't determine that it took you that long or not. He goes, I'm asking you just to give yourself 2 hours to do it. He goes, but you can use whatever materials you want. You can use whatever notes you want. He goes, I just ask you to do it 2 hours. And I think he also said, do it by yourself. Don't get into a group with 5 people here and do it all together. I like that. I like that better than what other people are doing, because it's true. I mean, if I'm working, I don't ever not use information. If I can find it, I'll definitely use it. So I don't think that's realistic to have somebody remember. You could say, well, in the medical field, they need to know all this stuff off the top of their heads. Well, true, but there's also, I am sure they are looking stuff up as well, because there's just so much information out there. I think it's somewhat ludicrous to expect that a doctor knows every single thing in their head, So anyway, yeah. Can I tell you something I don't know? Can you tell me something? I will say, I mean, I would hope that schools have gotten better with that and understand. Like, I had some math classes too that you were allowed to bring in like one cheat sheet per test. So you could have whatever notes you wanted on that one. It could be 2 sides, 8.5 by 11, and you could write whatever you wanted on that piece of paper for the test. And there was one guy, man, he made it like a science. He would write all these notes down, and then he would go to Kinko's copies and shrink down his notes, and then he would paste them on another piece of paper. So he just like compress all this information down so you could still read it, but it was like basically like the majority of the calculus book on 2 sides of paper. It was like, it was super impressive what he did. And I started following that advice. I'm like, that's actually a good idea. It's not violating a rule. So speaking of violating rules, I want to suppress one. So I want to make sure that I'm doing the suppressor in the right spot. I don't want to just say suppress this anywhere. And that's, I think, the hard thing with the suppressor is that I get it. Do not pass into unawaited tasks, because this task, when you create it, is not awaited yet. You're expecting that the caller is going to await it. So we want to make sure that if you're passing in a disposable instance into a task that you've created, and up the parent, somewhere you're doing either the callback on, I think this would be a dormants, is what it's on, or return value. If up the scope is where you're doing that, if we can detect that, then we will suppress it. I think that makes the most sense. Someone's being racist to me since 2 days. Should I also be racist? Well, that's that's getting a little outside the bounds of what I usually talk about here. That's man, that's hard. First of all, anybody doing that is just flat out wrong. That goes without saying. You know, how do you fight back against that? I would say in this case, probably fighting fire with fire is not necessarily the right thing to do, but you're also asking the wrong guy, because in America, being white, I've never experienced that. I don't know what it's like to be a black person, to be treated horribly with racist comments and innuendos and all this other stuff. I don't know what that's like. So I just am saying I don't know what that struggle is like, and it sucks. I've seen people do some horribly racist things, and it's astounding to me, when, like, in a bad way. Like, how do you even think that way? So how you respond to that, though, I think what you're suggesting is probably not the best idea, but you're not black. Okay, well, fair. I'm not, and I was only using that as an example. So I honestly don't have a great piece of advice for you there. So anyway, I want to move forward on this. So I think that's probably the right approach. As we go up the tree, we find that if you're in a callback method body or return value method body, then we'll suppress that call there. So it's going to be similar to what we were doing here. We want to look for either a task or a value task, I would assume. It probably doesn't matter which one. And we want to, and to be clear, Electron, I'm not trying to dismiss you. I'm just, you got to balance also going through what I want to do in this stream. So anyway, so I think that's the right scope of what we want to do. So, and I think this is also something that we probably should add as a test here, is to make sure that we're not suppressing it if it's not within a return value call. So actually, before I do anything, what's one of the things I should do? Create a branch. And I don't have any outstanding changes, so let's do that. And there's another one too for 2000 here, which I will get to probably after this. I want to do this one first. So let's do that. And this is actually interesting, because I don't think here we're doing this where what happens if you have a callback? How many times have I done a stream with this stuff and I work on something in this library and I suddenly go, what I thought would have been a somewhat simpler thing is now kind of blossom into something that's really big. All right, good luck on your exam. Hope it goes well. So I think we want to do something where we say like callback here and make sure that it's also being suppressed. So here we don't take anything except we're going to return that. And I don't think this is going to work. Yeah, it doesn't work. So we also want to take care of this, which is if in the scope of what you're looking for, invocation expression node, now with the return value, it's somewhat simple because we're restricting it to the case where return value just takes the value that we're returning back, which in this case would be a value task. So the parent should be invocation expression syntax. What we want to do though is find a parent where. So this I think is an extension method I made. Yeah. And we want to have a find parent though that has a where clause. So that we can say if the parent is actually a callback method on not just a return value, but that we basically want to pass this in to say either you're the return value or you're the callback value. So I'm starting to lose track of what I want to do. So let's say there's to-dos that we want to do here. Add support for our current suppressor to also look for value task usage within a callback body from an adornment. Okay. And that's also going to be trickier because return value requires an adornment that takes 4 generics. A callback doesn't. It can be at least 3 or 4. So that's going to get even trickier. We want to add a suppressor to suppress, I think it was CA 2025, within a return value, or we might as well do that right away, callback, call from an adornment. And then we also want to do this which this one's a little trickier because CA 2000 I think is expose objects before losing scope. Because we're putting an expectation that dispose is going to be called. Yeah. So on the expectations, that is not disposable. It's the instance that's coming back that is disposable, and we're passing it into use here. Our expectation is that whatever is trying to use this instance will dispose it. That's not on this code here. So we want to flag that here. And so we want to say whenever instance is being called, we're not going to suppress that. Okay, so we shouldn't allow that. We should suppress it. Okay. So that one should actually, if I think about it now, that should be add a suppressor to suppress. I will never be able to type this one out. Whenever dot instance, or just instance, with whatever arguments it is called on an expectations object. That should be pretty easy to track. So I think this is the order I want to go because we already have this one. And so I want to also look up to say, well, you know, when is this going to occur within a callback? Once I have that, then I can almost do the same thing for 2025. And then this one should also be simpler. Okay, so first things first. We have a test now. Let's get rid of that. Where this should fail, or this should pass, and it's failing right now. But what we also want is a test to say, do not suppress. Arbitrary method. Async. So in this case, we don't have anything to do with rocks at all. We don't have anything to do with here. We just have tester. And what we want to do here is we want to say, we could have async value text test async. And all we're going to do is return this. Okay. Which is fine. But this should not suppress anything. That's the code. Expected diagnostics should be nothing. I think this is what we want to do. That failed. What happened? Mismatch between... I can't read that. Value task instances returned from methods calls should always be used, typically awaited. Also, it is raised. Okay, well that makes sense. So I think... Oh, okay. So we're saying here this location exists. Okay, I get it. Sorry. Took me a second to realize what I was doing here. And then we want to put the bar donk thing there. Okay. Is suppressed is going to be false though. And now we're going to say expected. So in this case, it passes. Cool. That's good. That's just coverage to make sure that we're not arbitrarily suppressing this from any context. It's only within these two contexts. So now we have to write a test that does this. Okay, good. So let's go back to the suppressor here. Now, how many places is calling find parent? Only here. And that's right, because no, this is an analysis, so it could have been used a lot more. Right now, my where clause is just saying, is it find the first parent? That's an invocation expression syntax. But that's not good enough. I think what we're going to want to do is take the hit here. Okay. Context doesn't have the... Oh, well, you can get the submit, but it's a getter. Okay, that makes sense. I think what we should do is right before find parent, we get the semantic model here. Okay. Pass model in with a predicate that will examine the syntax node to be found. So the predicate will be a a T, if that makes sense, because this is a T here. Okay. And so we're saying when we find it, we'll give you we'll also provide a predicate to say basically what I'm doing down here. And so we can remove this up into the predicate. And we probably also want the predicate to take the semantic model, because we'll pass that in find parent. Because I think we use the semantic model maybe down here, maybe not. Okay, but that's fine. All right. So we're going to want to do something like this. Let's move the semantic model here. Okay, and now we want find parent to be changed, where we're passing in the syntax node that we want to find the parent from. We want to have a semantic model to say a semantic model, and then we also want a predicate of T crap. Well, we can use a func that just returns a bool. That's fine, because a predicate, I think, is just saying you give it one value. We could pass in a tuple here, which would be fine. Func of T semantic model bool is target. Okay. And so we look at the parent. If the parent is a T, and it is, so we want to reverse this. We want to say, we want to say do we want to recursively go up. So give me one moment here to get my brain in order. Maybe I need to pour some more coffee. Maybe that's what I need. That sounds like a great idea, Jason. Thank you, Jason. All right. So we're saying when it's not T, we want to just keep going until we find it and it's not null. Okay. Which I get. But what we want to do is say, well, we could say while true, but that's not what we want to do. We could say while parent is not null. Okay, so if at some point we're going to keep saying parent is equal to parent, and then we will get down to here. Okay. But now what we're going to do is we're going to say if parent is T parent. Okay, so that's the first thing. We want to make sure that it's actually the syntax node kind that you're looking for. Yeah. Then what we're going to do is say if it's the parent kind and is the target we're looking for. So what we want to pass in here is T parent semantic model. Then we return empty parent. Otherwise we, okay, so that's the only real change we had to make. Now, here's another question I have. Do we have, we do not. What am I giggling at here? I don't have tests specifically around this extension, and that's really what I should do. So let's do that. Gotta do the right thing. Jason, just use Copilot to generate all your tests. What are you doing? I'm not... I think I said this in a previous stream. I use these streams to learn. And try to educate other people, educate myself, and understand what it is that I'm trying to actually do. And I'm not saying if you're using Copilot or using any LLM that you don't. If I was at work, I would probably say, hey, Copilot, please write tests to cover the find parent method in syntax node extensions and put them in this class, and then let it go and then review it and see what did it do. Most definitely I would do that, but I still like doing things old school here, which is really weird to say, but so we want test. We want to say here public static async task find parent when parent exists and is target. So we're going to have some var code here. No. And so let's just put in a public static class tester. And what we want to do here is, what do we want to do here? We want to find an invocation that passes what we're, well, I mean, we could do the test of the case that I currently have, which is I have an argument, and then that's within an invocation. Or I could say I want to find an argument that's within a, well, it would be within a type declaration. I'd have to find a semantic. I'm trying to think of a generalized case in my head where I could use it for all of them. Because it's like I want to find where the parent does exist, and it is a target. Parent exists, but it is not the right target. I want to find where the parent does not exist, because then it doesn't matter. So there's really like 3 tests I want to do. And is not target. Async. And then I also want a case where find where parent does not exist. There. So this is just a public static void do, where we take a string value. Okay, we don't care what it does. And then here in public static void test, we're gonna have tester.do. So what I want to get is I want to find where we have an argument. So now I've got to look. I know I have like a case where I'm just doing so we could say that's our source. We could say syntax tree is equal to code. We could say compilation is equal to that, where a name is, it doesn't matter, test, syntax tree, that. And actually, what we want to find is var argument node is equal to syntax tree root. And we can say await here. Dot descendant nodes. Descendant of children. Yes. Of type argument. What are we looking for in the suppressor? Argument syntax. Yes. First. And actually, we know in this test it's going to be single because we know that we're not going to find another one. Okay. So now what we want to do is say var parent is equal to argument node find parent of invocation expression syntax why are we not seeing that? Argument node, argument syntax is a syntax node, right? Thank you for, it's one of the things I wish you did do. Okay, so now we should be able to pass in the model. Okay, so we need the model. Var model is equal to compilation get semantic model of the syntax tree. Perfect. Model, and then our func here is going to be we're in this case we're just going to say if you find it, it's true. So we don't care what it is. So we should assert enter. Ooh, that would be a that'd be an interesting C# keyword to have, like enter a scope. Whatever. That was a dumb idea. Okay. So we want using assert multiple scope. We want to say assert that parent. Yeah, we know it's not going to be null. I'm going to assume parent dot I'm blanking. Not text. I mean, we can do text. What am ugh. I'm trying to look for, what is it? The yeah, that's a syntax. I want the, oh, come on. Invocation expression. expression. It's not text. Identifier. That's what I'm looking for. I could never find where the freaking... Because it's a simple... Yeah. I think I want to keep this simple. I want to say we're parent dot get text. ToString is equal to so we're trying to get the invocation from the argument. We're saying it should be do. If I could spell. And yes, we are going to assume and then we don't need that. Does that work? The variable code is the same each value. Fine. That's the exact way you express that. We'll get to those in a second. There's no argument. Oh, we got to change that now, of course. What we want to do is say here, model, semantic model, and then here we want the node model. That's going to be this. So we're going to get from the model that's passed into us, which I guess we could close it, I guess, but whatever. So we want to get the node here is that, and then we want to return that the invocation is not null and that the method is that and that it's that. Right? And there we go. And so now we don't need this anymore. Because well, that kind of stinks. Then we have to re-get the symbol. But find parents shouldn't be aware of that, if that makes sense. Yeah, we have to do that again. And then now what's this saying? No, we know that's going to be good. Okay, so now if we come back here, if we run these tests, we should still get 2 out of 3. Crud. We just screwed something up. I guess we were hoping that was going to be... And it wasn't, because... What we could do is do a closure outside and not pass in the model itself. But well, no, the func would just take this. We would pass in. Okay, then there's that. And then here, we no longer pass the model in. We no longer pass that in. We can just say no, and now we can say semantic here. And what we could do is a couple things, but let's just do this for now. So let's go back here and let's see why. Oh, yeah, because now these tests change because we don't pass the model in. And we don't even need to get it anymore. What are we running in debug? Okay. So we do get that we find a node, that it is return value. Okay. What is this? So we should be returning tParent here, right? Yeah. That might be wrong. If we get out to this part here, then it is null. We didn't find it, so that we do have to change, but that shouldn't affect. Okay, so we find that. Why? Oh, duh. Yeah, it was a copy paste error. Okay. Here we would want to say, which this is going to evaluate to null, but let's be a little bit more explicit. Okay. So let's run this. Now we should get 2 out of 3 on this one. And we do. Okay, good. If we come back to this test, we're saying find this. What does this do? Fails. Why does it fail? Maybe because of the text. Let's get the model. Our models equal to compilation. And then we want to do what we're doing. Which is we want to get the actual method symbol. Hey, Goldie. I'll just call this method. Oh, we can do that. That's fine. So we want to say here, model, and then parent. We don't have a cancellation token in this case. And now we want to assert that the invocation name is equal to do. And that also will be this. That passed. Cool. All right. So that's, for this test, that did what we wanted it to do. All right. Let's now undo these. So now we want to say find parent, parent exists, and it's not the target. So it's basically the same as this, except less. So now our thing here is going to be false. And actually, if I come back to parent here, we could make this a predicate now of T. Same thing. It doesn't break. It's a little bit more succinct. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to say that this is false. So we can immediately say, assert that parent is null. Oh, crud. So we're also going to want here we're going to get the argument, but we want a parent thing that just will not happen. Attribute list. Because there should be no attribute in place. So this should also be null. Even though we're saying that we're trying to find the argument node here. We're trying to say find. No. That is still argument syntax. Okay. But what we're trying to find is a parent of attribute list syntax when this would be true, and this should also be null. So this should also fail. And well, it should fail. It should give a failure for the test because that's a failure for the find parent, because there would be no attribute list syntax. Good. Okay. So now this should also. Nice. Okay. So if we come back to our suppressor test here, this is the whole reason why I wanted to do this in the first place, which is we need to now. We did all that to do this. How many times do I say that? So we have the syntax node extensions. We got that the way we want it. We now want to change this to say if the invocation is not null, and then the name is return value and the symbol equality compare is that. So either the method name is going to be that, and it's going to be this. Or invocation method name is going to be equal to callback. Okay, so that's close. What we want now is the right thing here. So the invocation is not null, and it's either the return value name in adornments or it's the callback name. Now this is where we got to be a little tricky, because an adornment can either be 3 or 4. Okay, so we want the symbol name to be either adornment of 3 or equal to 4. That does that, that does that, and then that should do. Or we call back and either that or that. Okay, that's a little ugly. I could probably do it by ifs and make it a little cleaner, but so what we're saying is it's got to be not null, and then either the invocation name is equal to return value and it's off of Rocket's Ornaments that has 4 generics. And I love that they added in that color coloring for all the parentheses. So that's the first one. Or the invocation name is callback and it's either on the adornments for 3 or it's on the adornments for 4. So that's what we're looking for. And then once we have that, we don't care about its name or anything. What we're going to want to do though now is come back here and say does this pass now? Doesn't. Darn it. There is no diagnostics. Okay. That's interesting. Because there should be, right? Or does it not come up at all? Maybe. I don't know. If we say public static async value task, do async, doesn't matter. And we do a value, let's say value task is string. Value task from result of hi. Yes, so that is the 2012 we're trying to not have raised. That makes sense. But now, for some reason when we're doing a callback here within a func, it should definitely return something because it's saying value task is string here. Yeah, it's saying it's not coming up at all. I mean, if we don't have to care about this case, then we don't. Do we have an integration test that handles this? We should. Suppress CA 2012 tests. Okay, so how do I do this? So I put these record tests. We're going to say that. And then we're going to have a public interface I return value task. And we're going to have a value task of string do async. We don't care. And then we want this to have the create and make. God, I love that I put that in there. That makes things so much easier. Because there should now be an I return value task type in there. So nice. So nice. So now we want excuse me. A test public static void create. We actually only need to create, but that's fine. We want to do that. And we want to say use var expectations is equal to context create I return. Right. Okay. So now we want expectations setups on do async. And if we say return value here, value task from result high, that should be fine. We don't actually get a why do you care about that? Yeah, go away. So now we say var mock is equal to expectations instance. We now say var. We can say assert that await mock do async is equal to high. Oh. Does that work? Passes. That's great. Create using return value. Now, what I want to do is let's comment all this out first. Okay. Then we're going to put that in there. Let's take out the callback thing first. Surprised it doesn't. Yeah, there. So now we're just back to where we were before. Okay. What I want to do now is say, let's shut down and start up again before I move on. Because I want to make sure that I have a clean slate. Probably do, but. Come on. Build all the things. Build. Build. Good. Okay, so it went away. I just must have taken some time for it to go. I actually really need to generate code. What is taking you so long? Value tasks returned from method call should be... Well, yeah, that's because I put that there. I know that. Okay, so now our suppressor should not be doing what we want it to do. Using callback. Callback. And callback should be a func. It doesn't come up. Like, it doesn't matter. We could probably do a whole bunch of things in here. Say return. Now it's going to yell because we want, but no, we could say var x is equal to 2, var y is equal to 3, var z is equal to x plus y, and then we could say return if z is equal to 4, we say hi, otherwise we say hello, doesn't matter. What does it want us to do? Yeah. Whatever. But that, okay, so it's interesting. If it's the argument, then it's just the return value. Or how do I want to say this? For CA 2012, it only matters if it's actually an argument to return value. If it's a return value from a delegate or something, it doesn't care. Interesting. I am going to keep this in, though. Yeah, we don't need any of that stuff anymore. This should also work. Yeah, it does. Okay, but if we come back to our tests here, there should be none. I think that's what we're saying here, is that there should be none. And that's true. Okay, so actually, that, in a whole roundabout way, it's like it felt like I did work that I didn't need to do. In the sense that if I go look at my, hey guy, what languages is this? Could you shut up? I know, guy, so I can get away with that. And I want to be really clear: if people do have questions about stuff, I don't mind answering them, but I have had that question. I think what Guy's getting at, I've had that question a lot of times, which is, you know, please teach me how to program in X. And I'm like, no, I don't do that. I'm not just going to go off and teach somebody how to code. So, I mean, I kind of do, but that's not, I mean, I've actually toyed with maybe doing a series of, like, how do I start in C#? That would probably be really, really tough to do, though. But I mean, I've thought about it too, and just doing a series that I could revisit like every year and just say, if you want to start in C#, this is how you need to start, and give like the pure base bones things of that. I think that might actually be interesting. Did I get any positive feedback on the .NET Rocks episode? I don't know. Well, I should say I did see a couple comments. Hold on, let me. What Guy is referring to here, if I go to .NET Rocks, yeah, this one, and let me make sure that the comments are still nice, because there was 5 that showed up. Yeah, okay, so if I go back to scene here, this is a website or a podcast called .NET Rocks. It's been around for God knows how long. They have almost 2,000 episodes at this point. So yeah, it's been around for literally decades. And it wasn't like an achievement hit, but I've always wanted to do the podcast. And just through mutual friends, Rocky, I was able to get in touch with Carl and Richard, and we did the podcast, and I enjoyed it. So first of all, Guy, I'm glad you liked it. But there were some comments on here, a couple of them, and they did sound, pretty positive, and saying the metaprogramming book that I wrote, that they loved it. And I'm like, that's really nice to hear. I even say that in the podcast. It wasn't that book. It was the compiler API book I wrote in 2015. I was at a conference and there was like some after hours thing with all the speakers and the attendees. And somebody came up to me and said, hey, I just want to let you know, you wrote that book. That really helped me when I was in grad school, because I was doing something for my thesis on compilers and I had picked C#, and there wasn't a lot of information out there. And he said, your book really helped me get through some stuff with like technical issues in my work. I was like, wow, that's actually cool to hear. Delito, I think that's right. Hey, how you doing? By the way, if anybody's new to the channel, hasn't subscribed, please do so. I would really appreciate it. But this episode is what Guy's referring to. So yeah, check it out if you want. I enjoyed doing it. It was fun to do. And I got to talk about source generators, which is one of my most favorite topics. And yeah, so anyway, where was I? Where were we? We were back here. Okay, so I know this sounded like all this work seemed to be around a way of, you really didn't do much, but in some ways I think I actually did, because I realized, one, I needed integration tests around this. I did think it was also important to put an integration test here for callback and also a unit test, because I want to make sure that this is something that I've caught, and that if you make a value task in a delegate that is what's passed into callback, that's not affected. Doing the Neil deGrasse Tyson thing, I don't know, but it isn't. So I've got that in there. And then I also have a test in here that says this should be raised and it should not be suppressed. In this case it is. So I've increased the cases in my, I want to say coverage. I don't want to just say coverage like a code coverage number, because that's just an arbitrary, did you hit it or not? But like coverage in the sense of I covered the cases that are correct that I really want to do. I also improved the syntax, the define parent thing, where I can now pass in a predicate to say, hey, is this what I'm really looking for? And I think that's actually, even though I don't use it now, if I go back to my suppressor, like I could take all this off, because we really only care about the return value case, because that's where it's coming up on. I would imagine that for the thing I'm thinking about, which if I get all the way back to why I wanted to do this episode in the first place, is, okay, see, this is interesting, because it's going to be in a callback. Will this also be raised for a result, or when I do a return value? So that may also end up becoming useful here. So that's something I do also have to investigate and make sure that I've got there. And I probably will start with an integration test first to see if they're being raised, and then get the suppressor in to do that. So before I finish here, what I want to do is just let's run all the tests. I'm not going to run all the code generation tests right now, because we're in a branch. I just want to make sure that all my tests pass here. I'm so glad that there was one thing that was always taking forever in my tests, and it was, where is that? Yeah. Way down here, this code to get the reference assemblies, I was doing this every single time, and I'm like, that is such a waste of time. And so I just made it a lazy, and now it only hits it once during the test execution. So that helped out a ton in terms of performance. So that, there's a lot of tests doing a lot of things here, and this made it run so much faster. So, okay, so let's commit all this stuff. 396. Hardened the work around the existing workaround CA 2012. And I believe that's done here. And I want to also, let's put our notes in here to say for the repo, Jason rocks docs notes, because I always do this. Well, if I have any notes, I like just to keep them around. Why not? 396 notes. All right, cool. So the next time I do a stream, a coding stream, I'm going to continue working on this and actually, hopefully, get the suppressor in for 2025 and then also for 2000. So this was kind of a refresher stream, but it got some things in a little bit better state, slightly better, and hopefully we can get those other two done next time. I will probably be doing a coding stream Tuesday morning, would be the next time I do one, probably. I don't want to let this go for long, and I also have to, I have a conference that I'm going to go be speaking at in March, so I got to also start making sure all that stuff works, and also have one in April, so got to balance that as well. So I want to thank everybody who stopped by to watch either now live or in the future. Again, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. And if you have, I do appreciate you for doing that. I will be doing a stream either this afternoon and or evening, still trying to 100% Lego Lord of the Rings and get that done. And today is going to be a little bit of an experiment because I got the 8-bit music block. So I'm wondering if I turn that on for the entire stream, I'm not going to get dinged for, and get demonetized. I've not gotten a copy strike yet for all my streams on that game, but I have been getting some, all of them have been demonetized because of all the music. There's just no way to cut it out enough that it won't pick it up. So that's been a fun adventure. But I'm getting close to finishing that and 100%ing it. I just want to get that done. So I will be doing a stream or two of that this afternoon. But for now, I am done with this stream. Thank you all for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you in the future.